is E&P Reports, a vodcast from editor and publisher. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And this episode sponsored by IQ Audience Plus by Town News. Consumer revenue has never been more important. Digital leaders at media organizations worldwide understand the need to accelerate its growth now. Plus, traditional one-size-fits-all paywalls aren't the answer. They're blunt instruments that treat all visitors the same way. IQ Audience Plus is a smart, dynamic metering solution that empowers media companies to maximize revenue by identifying key audiences, seeding engagement, and growing membership and subscriptions. Supercharge your consumer revenue, grow engagement, and bolster your advertising income now with IQ Audience Plus. Visit townnews.com EP today to learn more. And hello again, I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine Quick Housekeeping. Listening to us on your favorite podcast platform. By all means, please follow us. Watching us on our YouTube channel, smash the subscribe button under the screen. There's a bell to the right. Hit that. You'll get an update each and every time we upload a new episode of E&P Reports. Two incredibly well-versed individuals are joining me today, icons in the media industry. Actually, if you've been to conferences, you've been around, you've seen Jed Williams. Jed, your pedigree and background, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, let's be honest. You had many years in the industry on the traditional side, digital side. You were working for Nancy Lane at the LMA for almost 5 years. Spent some time with the doctor himself, Ken Doctor. Doing the brand new Lookout local think tank. And now you've launched a brand new product called Checkout DFW. We'll check that out in a moment, but I want to introduce David Arkin. David, also many years, and always on a senior level in content, but I really looked at your LinkedIn profile. You started as a young pup at a newspaper somewhere, did you not, sir?
I did, yeah, an education reporter in Eastern New Mexico, and just worked my way all the way up.
And you had a stint at the LMA as well, 4 years at Gatehouse in senior management, and the two of you have come together with a project called, let's put it on the table. Check out DFW, and if you want to check out DFW, you check out DFW at checkoutdfw, right? .com. That's where you guys are located right now.
Well done. I'd love to tell you that was sheer coincidence, but we actually did do that on purpose. We thought through, what's a name that represents what we're doing that actually might roll off the tongue and actually might connect to what somebody actually does to connect with us. So it's nice that the dots connect that way.
All right. So let's discuss the actual platform first, then we can get into the wherewithals and philosophies and all that and more. I went to check out DFW, looked it over, and it's described as the first of its kind real estate and local recommendations product that helps locals live more enjoyable lives. So I didn't see a lot of ads on it. What I saw, I saw a lot of sponsored content. Have I got that right, sir? I mean, is that pretty much what you're offering as a revenue a source for this project, Jed?
Yeah, I mean, why don't I start there, and then why don't I hand it off to David, and David can take the baton and talk about what does helpful real estate content and trusted local recommendations and expert advice, which is our mission and vision statement from a content standpoint. What does that actually mean in terms of how we serve our readers? But yeah, I mean, from a business model standpoint, Mike, we're not a subscription business. This is an open access product. It's designed to be helpful and relevant content to anybody in North Texas. And by the way, North Texas will soon become the third biggest market in the country. Sure. So North Texas isn't just Dallas. It's this vast, sprawling, seemingly endless metro now of 7.4 million people.
It's called the Metroplex.
The Metroplex. If you're going to live here, you got to know the native term. So the Metroplex, proper term is right. And so we're serving that big audience, but we're serving specific pockets of that audience that David will talk about. And our content is really a utility to help people get jobs done, learn about their communities, be more connected, et cetera. So I'm kind of talking about what we're not as a business model. There's no paywall. There's no subscription. There's no membership. There are opportunities for us to launch reader revenue down the road, and we're certainly thinking of those. But we're really focused as a business. We're a for-profit, to be clear, and we're really focused on the business community and on marketing partnerships and really doing that in a variety of ways, Mike, that can include sponsorship and targeted advertising and all of those things that can still work with the right audience. But the way I describe it is really at the beginning and the end of the day, we're a media company, a digital platform, which means we're a content company. And this business and the business model is architected around great content and how we can use that to benefit and help local real estate pros, but also broader based businesses really thrive in a number of ways.
Well, okay, let's stay on that before we swing it down to Dave, because I remember Ask the Experts, Ask the Pros. Remember those days? Never liked those two platforms because they had two words I hated, ask the, because it kind of implied that everybody was then going to send emails to these experts that you were establishing. Yeah. So I reinvented it a few years ago, and I launched it in about 20 or 25 newspapers. This is when I was, doing my, running around to all the different papers and helping to generate revenue and doing multimedia campaigns. And we called it Insiders. And what we did was we had people write professional content, and then had it kind of endorsed by an expert. But that content was specific to an industry. So we'd have and it was all hyper local. Like there would be a local plumber giving advice about this, or a local real estate agent giving advice, what have you. So when I went through your site, you're hyper local. There's no question. I saw some of the communities. I'm familiar with the Metroplex. And you have Allen, Salina, Dallas, Flower Mound, Fort Worth, Frisco, all these really high-end towns. The first thing I noticed was really quality content that you gave the perception, okay, David, it looked like that the real estate agent was writing it, or endorsing it, or recommending a restaurant, or recommending some kind of a service. Is that the model, David? And are you creating that content for these experts or these people?
Yeah, so we, as part of our expert program, we have what's called kind of verified experts. And so some of those are real estate people. A lot of them are. They're realtors,
right, of course,
people, lenders. But we're working down the community side. So we're working on chambers, and we're working on visitor bureaus, and we have a mom in Salina who really knows the market well. So these experts are sort of like kind of, going really kind of across a wide spectrum of sort of areas. And we're working with them. We come to them, so we vet them. They come into a recommendation. So we make sure there's a process we're going through to make sure they know what they're talking about. Once we vet them and they become experts, we then come to them about a topic. So it might be a mortgage topic. It might be a list of restaurants. It might be the best daycare. So we go to them and we ask them to share. They're recommending this to their clients already. So we're asking them to recommend it to us. And from there, we take that content and then we do some research on our own and basically build a pretty grand. What's unique about this, though, is that that's not really how media companies create that kind of content. It's usually just some sort of random online research. So we have a lot of vetting going on, and I kind of call it like a matching game going on, where we sort of see the same business being noted numerous times through this expert and other research that we're doing to kind of build kind of the quality there. So it's a pretty unique way of kind of approaching content.
Yeah. And the days of mass content, of me having the same article that I would sell to each individual newspaper for the plumber, are over. I see you're you're shaking your head no, Jed. That doesn't work anymore.
Well, and that's where, sure, on some level, what's old is new again, but actually what's new here is actually somewhat novel, we believe. And so this approach to experts, or, community recommendations, like David was talking about, the way there's doing content on their behalf, like you're talking about, at scale, and then going to every plumber or every, electrician or whatever. And we're doing something very different, which is we're building a relationship with every real estate or community expert. Let's just take real estate as a microcosm for a second here. We understand what somebody's expertise is. Is it home design trends? Is it finance and refi? Is it first-time home buyers? Is it senior living communities, whatever it might be? And then we're saying, okay, they're an expert in those domains. To David's point, that word verify is really important. Nobody can just come to us and say, I want to be an expert. Here's some money. Slap an expert label on me. That's a great way to lose reputation with your audience and with your other experts really quickly. And what we do is we work with every single one of these experts in that domain of expertise to go, what are the specific questions they can answer for our audience, jobs they can help our audience get done? So it's specific to them, and we're co-creating content with them. So rather than us just saying, oh, okay, here's a realtor and they want to have content and have a voice on our site, and we're just going to do everything for them. Sure, we can do versions of that, Mike, as original sponsored content. But in the context of experts here, David will work with them directly to bring them questions, bring them feedback from our readers. What a concept. We're actually authentically and continuously listening to our readers, using that feedback to go get their questions answered and their jobs done. The realtor in this case, or the real estate pro, is providing the insight that is the foundation of that story or that piece. And then we add a level of editing and polish and publish it and promote it. And it really becomes, promoted premium content co-creation here is the way we frame it.
And I'm sure you urge then the customer to also use that content in whatever newsletters they're doing or on their own website and their own blogs or what have you as well. I mean, this is their content they can use when you create it for them or with them, I should say.
No doubt. And it's actually a really important value proposition in our go-to-market here. And it's, what you're saying is nothing new, and I think we knew this coming into launching Checkout DFW. But I mean, I would say, David, I think we've even been, pleasantly surprised, or it's been reaffirmed, Mike, how important that is. That anytime we're doing something that's content-based with a partner, sure, it's about the content production and then distributing across our site, our email, our social, blah, blah, blah. It is just as important, if not more important, to many of these businesses, specifically those in the real estate community, who we all know are sales and marketing people by training. Like, they wake up in the morning and they're like, cup of coffee and let's go sell and market. And so they need content. They have a big content appetite. They have a big content gap and challenge. And we're solving that for them. And it's not just on our platforms. It's also powering that for them and their marketing channels.
But one of the reasons this works, I think, is because it's not about, it's centered on like helpfulness and usefulness. And it's interesting in Texas, there's so many people moving to Texas right now. I mean, I can't tell you, there's dozens of pages just set up for Californians moving to Texas. And there's so many questions that are bubbling up there on a daily basis. Sure, some of it's about like, where should I live and all that, but a lot of it's about how do you live in Texas and what are property taxes and what are those tornado sirens that go off and I'm freaked out over those. Like, it's all those sorts of things. But if we can be in front of that and actually, it's interesting, like answering things that people are actually searching for and actually asking on Facebook, and the realtor can help, be the voice to explain that. It's just a different way of approaching a different level of sponsored content, a different way of approaching sponsored content. And at the end of the day, it has mass audience reach and boom. And so we're really accomplishing quite a bit through that approach.
All right. Well, you're attacking, how should I put this, a marketplace that it's already been established, crave your product. No ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, Borrell was out there screaming content. LMC, LMA's got their branded content project. There is no question that there's an appetite now for quality content into the small business world. Let's put that. And if no one believes that, give me a call, send me a text, and I'll send you all the research and back up on that. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jed, it just goes back to basics. People have realized that social media is not putting up a menu anymore. Social media has to have a story behind it. If you want your website, your local website to optimize on Google, you got to have changing content on it. It just can't be a brochure that lives the same way. And everybody wants to build databases for newsletters. What are you going to push in a newsletter? An ad? Or better yet, it should be a story. So
it's got to be dynamic content. To your point, it's got to change. It's got to be fresh. It's got to be new. All those things you said. And then I would also just underscore the word David said. It's got to be helpful. It actually has to be interesting. It has to move the needle for whoever your target customer is, whether you're a realtor, a lender, a title company, a bank, or you're a retailer or, a community college or whatever. It's not just real estate pros. And we work with way beyond just real estate pros. But I'll give you a kind of a microcosm of this. And I think this tells you, we're not trying to do all the jobs of the daily newspaper, for instance, right? We're really focused in some key niches that are really big, substantial niches in a huge market. Do you know how many people in Dallas-Fort Worth last year had an active real estate license?
I'm going to take a guess now. Okay. Because I just did this project for Tampa Bay, where I live. I would say 18,000.
Twice that. More than 35,000 people.
And let me guess now, there's only 1,500 new listings a day available.
Probably. I mean, the supply demand curve is so out of whack. It's crazy, right?
If I may just interject here, because it's my show and I can say, I find that industry fascinating because I can't get two auto dealers to want to sit at the same table because they're so competitive. But these people join an industry, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, train together. They all love each other and they're fighting every friggin' day over listings. It's an amazingly tough business right now. Don't you agree?
I think it's always a tough business, and it's even tougher than ever right now, given the scarcity in supply and demand and the volatility of the market. But I use that example just to kind of come back to your point about content and David's point about content that's helpful, that has an impact, for our audience, certainly, because our brand has to have an impact for people to come back and use us, but also for these advertisers and these businesses. If you're one of the 35,000 active licensed realtors in Dallas-Fort Worth, think about pushing that rock up the hill in terms of standing out. You're not going to do it, Mike, the way you talked about, with just slapping ads anywhere and running the glossy power pose photo in the magazine like you always have.
Or how about the billboard that says, trust the name you know?
Right. Yeah. Which of the 35,000 names is that again that I should know?
Yeah.
So we feel like this combination of really original, powerful, memorable content that can then find its way to targeted audiences with us, and then target audiences that those real estate pros are already building, to your point, in their own database and in their own active communities, and then it's really, sure, that's just real estate. It's a similar set of challenges, like you said, for an auto mechanic or an electrician or a t-shirt shop or a coffee shop. And so we think that these problems and the solutions transfer.
Okay, so let's take it all to base. This is how I close those deals. And I just did a workshop on this, a webinar for a market for the branded content project that you would have loved, because it basically started off with all media's reach and frequency, right? So you got to target and do it often. B, let's get into the messaging now. If you want a call, click, or a customer, I always say the 3 C's, instant results, then you need to have a really powerful offer that's time sensitive, and it's got to be a good one. But then you need to also brand yourself. And then I always say there's 2 ways to brand yourself. Number one, reviews. I call that borrowed trust syndrome. We're in a society now that nobody wants to shop anything till they see what someone else says. I'm going to keynote a speech, Nick, tomorrow. I'm flying into Minneapolis to do the keynote, the Minnesota Press. I looked at the reviews for the hotel they're sticking me at, just to see, if I have a plug next to my desk. But the other way I say is establish your expertise.
Yep.
I always say, your unique selling proposition, if you're smarter than the other guy, I'll do business with you. And that's where the content comes in. So I saw what you're up to. So now here's what media companies kick back to me when I say, you got to get into this content world. You got to get into this, because this is how you sell branding. Not only, and if it's quality content, it optimizes on Google. They always say, I can't afford it. It costs money to write this stuff. Can I just sell the darn banner ad on the website, 300 by 250, not change it for 6 months? It's so much easier. Can I just sell the little Toma ad like the old days? Mm-hmm. Help me explain to a media company. You've got thousands of C-suite news publishing executives on this platform who will throw that in your face going, I don't have the resources for that. People charge me an arm and a leg to write a story. What is your response? Or David, how would you respond?
I think David should take that first, and then I'll pick up with a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the old way of creating content is, I need 2-3 sources. I need to go through all these processes to kind of check all the boxes off and whatnot. And that's just dramatic. Has dramatically changed. The credibility is still very important, and the sourcing is still very important. But the sourcing now comes from many different places. That doesn't have to be so traditional. And so that sourcing can come from people that are actually experts. That sourcing can come from online reviews and Facebook announcements. I mean, basically how we sort of do our new business announcements is all through the businesses posting on Facebook. We aggregate that out, and now we have 5 new businesses that have opened in this community. So it's just totally changed. So the speed to create content has just quadrupled because of all the tools that are out there. But media companies have to move beyond, the typical I'm going to do 2 a day kind of thing, or they're never going to get there, and utilize some people like experts to help tell those stories and getting information or aggregating out the questions that people are asking that don't take, all day to be able to kind of put together is a really important thing. The other thing would be looking at freelance modeling and looking at internship programs to help kind of create some of this stuff. When you've created the infrastructure to be able to do it, is really the way to kind of think about these things. Because when you're not talking about sitting in a city council chamber for 4 hours taking notes, and you need to know all the things on how those stories need to come together, if you need strong journalism backgrounds to do those things, it's interesting. The way I talk about it is, we do journalism and we apply the standards and criteria of journalism in a very 2022 way in terms of how people kind of, are connected, engage in audiences. And that's just a very different way. So there are economical ways of doing this today. It's through partnerships. Like our partnerships are very deep. We have chamber partnerships, we have visitor bureau partnerships, we have realtor partnerships, and all those things are adding up into like this big pool of content just done in non-traditional ways.
Yeah. So let me add just one or two. So David nailed. I don't have a lot to add, but just a couple of things I would say are, first off, for those C-suite executives that might be working, I guarantee you most of them are working at larger companies than David and my current company, because you're looking at Checkout DFW. And we're two guys who have self-funded an enterprise. David's done an incredible job of building a network of freelancers and interns and contractors. We're adding some sales resources, but we are a lean, mean digital platform machine. And so if we can do it and do it fairly flexibly and fairly scalably thus far, and I would take it a step further and go, we're betting a good part of our business model and our business solvency and growth on the ability to do this, then I don't mean this in a threatening way. I simply mean it in a motivating way. You said, people will say, how can I afford to do this? I might come back, and I don't mean it glibly. How can you afford not to do it?
I was about to say that.
You have to find ways to be doing this if you truly want to be helpful and impactful to what businesses need. If you want to go in the way you've always gone in and said, here's package 1 and here's package 2, or here's my prep sports special, or here's my home and garden special, or whatever, sure, you might be able to get some business the way you always have. But if this is really about growth and transformation for some media companies, or accelerated growth for newer media companies, and if this is, I'm channeling my inner Gordon and Corey here, if this is really about taking share and shifting share, then you got to grow, and you have to grow non-linearly. And this is a way to do that. And David just gave a whole bunch of great examples of how you can do that and leverage partners and do it flexibly and not have it break your bank.
I just have to put in the little asterisk. The Gordon Corey reference are two executives at Burrell Associates who issued that recent study, but it's other studies as well now. There's an appetite for content on all different business levels. Okay, so your value proposition is we create the content, we put it into our website, we push it in our social media, we establish you as an expert. How often would that realtor be updating that story, David? Does it vary depending upon the category and the stuff? Or are you trying to refresh this stuff once a month? I mean, how often are you circling back to that guy? And if you're trying to scale and you just take on 10 new clients, how can you circle back? And I mean, does it get to a point where you're overworked, or do you have this down to a good flow, Dave?
Yeah, first one is really interesting. When we launched the site, we launched with more than 300 articles. I've done a lot of web launches in the past and never had that much content. And we needed it because we needed to have an experience in each city that almost felt like a newcomer's guide, and all the things that you would need to kind of look for and find if you were kind of looking to think about potentially kind of coming to a city. So it's a very unique sort of situation. All of those articles have to be updated because those are annual changes, and all the businesses change, the best of lists change, all that stuff has to change. All that stuff has to get updated. The realtors, we're trying to go work with them on a very regular cadence and, schedule. So every month we're trying to do new content with them. And so that might be like a little niche, like a question of, what are the best communities to go into if I'm interested in new construction? Is a home warranty, right for me? How do I kind of decide that? So we are putting new questions in the queue every week and every month for realtors to be able to sort of answer. So it's a really important part of the volume and the consistency of that. So
you're doing a lot of that. Here are some questions I'd like you to answer. That's what we do at E&P for a lot of the stories we're doing now. It's very efficient. And by the way, Jed, you're looking at E&P. Me and my wife, we are all outsourced now, and we are very, very scale oriented, and we're generating tons of content. I agree with you.
It's these dynamic duos that can work, right?
I mean, you don't need to put together a team of 10 full-time, with benefits journalists. I know people are now going to scream at me and with unionization, but the truth is you can have a lean, mean machine today.
And also, I'll just add, it's funny that David's talking about experts, which is a revenue program for us, and I'm talking about content here for a second. So we'll do a little rollover.
Yeah, you guys are flip it.
But what is interesting, is, and I said this a minute ago, but I think it's worth doubling down on this. We're operating in very big niches. Don't get me wrong. I mean, when you think about our mission statement and we say our goal is to provide helpful real estate and moving content, trusted local recommendations and expert advice that serve 7 or 8 of the fastest growing communities in Texas and in the country. Like these are like Frisco and McKinney are they're in every top 10 list for fastest growing city in the country, not just Texas. So we're talking about huge niches here. But to be clear, we also have made some, David, we've made some focused decisions about what we are and what we're not covering. And so we're not covering cops and courts. We're not covering City Hall every single day. We're not covering pro sports. Frankly, we're not even really covering prep sports right now. We can expand into that in some ways, but what it allows us to do is really have this intent focus on these things which are big, which warrant our full attention. And it really allows us to attack those niches robustly so that, like David said, somebody would come to our site in the first week or two. And I think they're used to coming to a new website or a new media company and going, there's not going to be enough here. I'm going to hit a dead end. It's going to be boring. Call me in 6 months when you got more content and this is interesting to me. Or frankly, they're just kind of used to the pace and rhythm of a weekly or monthly city magazine or newspaper in a community, in a suburb like that. And, when they need something, they can't get it. By the time they get it, it's outdated sometimes. That whole dilemma, they would come to our site after a month and go, like, you guys have the opposite problem. There's so much content on here. I was blown away. And how do I find that? How do I navigate that most easily? And so that's a credit to David and the team he's built, but it's been a different problem for us in a good way. It hasn't been, oh gosh, we're going to need 6 months to build a critical mass of content to actually build audience awareness and habit. It's been actually, how do we continue to build different entry points and navigation and user experience with our site, but also off-site through email, in organic Facebook groups in the community, et cetera, where people can fully unlock like just how much content there is and how kind of evergreen overall it is in its value.
Yeah, what we hear people say often is, I wish I would have had this when I moved. And that is like a great testament to what we're doing, I think. And it's actually why we actually did this, because Jed and I both have moved a lot. And every time we moved, it was really hard to find that information. Realtors are great, but realtors can only recommend so much. And so being able to have like a full force of like thinking about that moving site, that reader cycle of, I'm thinking about moving, what can we give you? We can give you school district info. We can kind of give you neighborhood profiles. We can kind of help you kind of plot where you want to go. And now you move somewhere. How do we kind of get you set up in your new life? Like, how do we tell you?
It's funny that you would bring that up.
Things.
I like that value proposition. I remember there was a company called Homesteader based out of New England. It was a really smart guy this was pre-internet where you could, it was mostly print content. And they set up franchises across the United States to mail once a month to someone who just relocated information about relocation. And then the local franchisee would enter local content like you were. But the value proposition to the advertiser was people who just relocated have no buying habits. They don't know where to get their dry cleaning done. See, I get that. But when I came to your site, David, I didn't feel like it was just relocation. If I lived in Plano, I'd still go there for the restaurant recommendation. So why do you, this is what's in my brain, because first thing I did is go to your About Us page to learn about it and get your mission statement. But I think anybody, okay, I'm giving you kudos. I don't think it's just a relocation site. Did you tell me why do I feel that way? Why?
Well, we did that on purpose because we knew that if we just made this about relo, there was going to be a smaller opportunity and
you wanted to find your lane. I get it.
Audience, and so we know that if we can help people in all three ways. Before you move, we get you here, and now you live here. Like that's sort of the holy grail. And so we know that people are actually interested even before they move somewhere to know the things that they're going to be able to do. But once they get there, and they can actually now go and do them. And we're tapping into people that already are there. And here's the thing: when you're in places where there's tons of development happening, like it's really important to like give that kind of information to you so you can figure out how to get the best out of where you live. And so we're able to sort of do that. So we really have this kind of 3 levels kind of working like together in a pretty effective way.
Yeah, and that's what also opens up our business opportunities beyond just real estate. Because to your point, Mike, and to David's point, if we're providing a service and a resource that helps somebody that's lived in Plano or Frisco or whatever for 5 or 10 years, but still wants to feel connected to that place, wants to know about new business openings and closings, needs to know about new kids activities, family activities, community resources, volunteerism opportunities, new home services for their home, et cetera. They have a new home need. Not to mention, to David's point, the community around them. These communities are changing and growing so quickly, like I talked about, that the Frisco that they lived in 3 years ago is a long way away, or is far removed from the Frisco they live in today. And what are all the new developments, both residential and retail and commercial, that they should know about? So exactly as you said, we can be consistently and persistently helpful to them, just as we are for the person who's sitting in California or New Jersey or whatever, dreaming of not, if you're in New Jersey, dreaming of not being in the snow and maybe being in Texas right now, or maybe the person that's like literally in the U-Haul coming across country and has picked a house and is trying to set up their life. It's a whole customer life cycle for us there, and being helpful to each of those people and those milestones. But for those people that are just saying, I want to live my best life in Frisco, no matter how long I've been here, that opens up our business. Not only does it open up our audience opportunity, it opens up our business opportunity to any local business that wants to be connected to them.
All right, so I said, and we only have a few minutes left, because if I go too long, a bunch of snarky people say my podcasts are too long. You should always stop. Somebody said to me, send me an email yelling at me in capital letters, you should stop at 25 minutes. I don't know who made up that rule. We've already gone over that, but this is fascinating. So now let's go up to 30, 40,000 feet. Both of you are industry veterans. Both of you have had senior level positions in legacy media companies. And both of you, like me, had to be part of the transition in the digital world. In other words, we were all a part of watching legacy media for decades have to deal with the change. Now we're in a world where legacy brands are in trouble for a number of reasons. We can talk about the Facebook, Google issues, whatever. We can talk about the loss of classified revenue over the years. We can talk about all of that. But now you got the nonprofit startups that are hitting the bigger markets, that are being funded to do investigative journalism. So there's one lane that's starting to crash or get even tighter. The local newspaper in markets was trying to be all things to all people. You're now squeezing them on your end, correct me if I'm wrong, on this lifestyle relocation side, and they're getting trapped to find their lane. I'm now going to ask you, Jed, and I'm going to ask the same question to David. I'm going to throw you a lot of money. I just won the lottery. I want Jen Williams to run my metropolitan, big 140-year-old brand legacy newspaper. You're in charge right now. You're the publisher. Would you launch this initiative as part of it? Do you think that's the solution now? That if I can do it if I can do it here in Dallas and build this audience and build this content, don't let someone else do it. Build these verticals. Those are the words I use. Would this be the first thing on your list? And this is what I want to ask.
First off, that's an appealing offer. I'll have to think about that, though. I probably know my answer, but we will still take some of the funding if people want to provide that, so that David and I can grow faster. I guess I would have to answer that on two levels. One is I want to answer it through the prism of check out DFW for just a second, and then I'll shift over and I'll answer it through the lens of a large, established, incumbent, media organization. For us, obviously, do we think that this kind of niche, or that these niches and this type of content and business model ultimately has the opportunity to travel and to be resonant and to be useful in other growth markets? Of course, or we wouldn't be doing this. I mean, I think probably people know David and I well enough to know that we're ambitious about growth. We think about growth all the time. With that said, you have to land and expand your model. And so we have to earn the right to do that over time. We're completely focused on DFW right now. It's a massive market with a massive opportunity and a ton of work for us to do. And we are really, really early days in that. But in time, do we think it's a model with application wherever? In Tampa, Florida, in Phoenix, Arizona, in Oklahoma City, wherever? Sure, we do on some level. Now, let me shift over for just a second to where you were really going. I don't know I don't know if I can give great overall advice of exactly how to do this if you're an incumbent player. But what I would say is that I generally am a passionate believer in niches that are big enough to have real business opportunity. Because if you're doing niche well, niche kind of carries mixed connotation, but if you're doing niche well, what does it really mean? What it means is you're really solving specific problems and you're super serving specific readers or audiences or consumers. And if you're doing that, you can actually create real loyalty with them by creating real clear value for them. Some of the biggest influences on my career over a long time have frankly not been national or global media companies. They've been niche digital platforms, the Industry Dives and the Hustles and the Skims and the aging media networks of the world that aren't even in local necessarily, but they are really focused on super serving audiences, and they grow over time. I've got Sean Griffey from Industry Dive ringing in my ears as I say this. If I were a traditional media company, I would absolutely focus on what are niches that are valuable to you and that you can excel in, because also I think there's a certain reality for a lot of local media companies that don't have 300-person newsrooms anymore. They may have 20% or 30% of what they used to have. If you're still trying to be everything to everyone with a completely different staffing and resource model, it's really hard to do.
I couldn't agree with you more, but may I make an addendum to that? Like dot.
Yeah.
The best advice I ever got, Jed, was from the guy that invented hot hits radio. Because Mike Joseph, everyone said, was an idiot. You can't play the same 40 records over and over. He had done research, learned that that's what the audience wanted. And he basically said to me one night at a convention, kid, find out what they want and give it to them. Your niche has an appeal to the advertising community now. You're providing a product they crave. So I always say, if you're going to get into a niche, explore it and make sure it's profitable. You see what I'm saying? Because I've seen newspapers, because the editor loves fly fishing, suddenly go off and go nuts and look at the clicks and the
just
page
one last
views.
thing, and then just one last thing, and then I want David to take it from here. But just to be clear, like we did tons of research and interviews. David talked earlier about talking to realtors and real estate. What did we do, David? I mean, 3 dozen, 5 dozen conversations.
So you did your due diligence before the product.
To understand where there was real value in these niches and kind of what niches and opportunities to focus on. The other thing is, and this gets back to lanes and how different business models connect to different lanes. So take that idea you mentioned a minute ago of like nonprofit, investigative, big J journalism. That stuff's valuable. I don't think anybody on this podcast is going to dispute that that's valuable. But it has to have a different business model because it may not be as universally and directly appealing to an advertiser or even necessarily a consumer. And so all of the philanthropic activity and the different foundations that, individual, corporate, whatever, that we've seen step up to back that, overall, I think that's a good movement because it's giving more runway for those models to exist. And those models need to exist, but they're going to exist with a different type of business model than something like what David.
Precisely. Exactly.
Yeah,
all right, David, you bring it home now.
I'll bring it home.
Same question to you.
Yeah. So I remember a few months ago, I was reading a Metro newspaper, and it was on a Sunday, when you have more time with it. And I was flipping through like the 12th section or something. And I had been on it for about 5 minutes and I was about done with the paper. And I thought to myself, there's nothing in here that I care about. There's nothing in here. And it's Pulitzer winning prize newspaper. Great newspaper. But you know what? Nothing touched my life. Like I wasn't going to look at anything there and say, okay, I'm going to go out and do that today. Or I should think about making time for that next week. Or I can see how this could change my life. It was like when a newsroom says, and I've been in dozens and dozens of newsrooms, it's a good story. It's a great story. And it might be a great story. But you know what? If it can't help people do something with it, and if it's not applicable to their life in some way, if it can't help them, then it really doesn't matter. And I think that really connects to the business model that is sort of, in trouble right now when we think of it that way. And so, whether it's real estate or, we talked about other ideas. Jed and I brainstormed some other ideas I think are pretty hot. I don't want to share them on this pod because we may do them at some point, but it wasn't just real estate, and there are other ones out there that are underserved. And at the end of the day, this idea of having everything under one house, if you will, in this product we're creating is what we're trying to do because it didn't exist. And I think when you think of it that way, it doesn't have to be everything, but you have to change how you think about it, and your direction for what actually makes a good story can't be, it's just a great story. It's an interesting story. I can actually use it in my life. And that's the big change that's needed.
I'm going to add a ... to you, and then we're going to bring this home. I agree with everything you just said, but I also agree that you can fund a newsroom that does investigative journalism with many legs on the stool. Maybe nonprofit and philanthropic contributions have to be made if more media companies didn't explore niches like this, where you're telling people what they want to hear. You're giving them content that they crave while you still can go investigate the news. The newsroom can go spend 3 months doing a spotlight story on a school board and expose something and win that Pulitzer Prize. Granted, that may not be the #1 site traffic page. It will be eventually, but you see, this is the challenge we're having now. I think we've got to open up our minds and find out what people want and give it to them on the advertising side and the readership side. You guys, in my humble opinion, have done two good things. When I went to the website, I was reading some, hey, Dave, you're not an idiot. You're writing some really good stuff. And I know who you are. And you earned your chops, my friend. So I'm sure you're rejecting advertisers who want to do bad stuff. I'm sure you're rejecting writers for you, and you're making sure that you're putting out a quality content. And Jed, I know you're not an idiot. And what you've done is you found a niche in the advertising community. Because when you're pitching them this stuff, they're going, wow, I'm paying that person in a garage to write this stuff I don't even like. And now I'm getting incredible content that I can work with. I mean, this is where the advertising community, by all that's right and holy now, is going. And the opportunity now for advertising, I know I'm pontificating, but it's my show. The opportunity for advertising now is hyper local professionals. It's no longer walk down Main Street, knock on doors and find a retailer like a jewelry store. Those days are gone. You got to get into home improvement, real estate, legal, healthcare, education, elderly services. Jed, what am I missing? Am I hitting the hot buttons right now?
Well, you senior care, education, daycare. I mean, I could go on and on. We've got
that's where the dollars are. That's
when I was at Lookout, and Ken will probably watch this, and Ken and I are still friends and talk all the time. When I was at Lookout, we built the majority. I mean, there are multiple legs to that stool, but the #1 leg when it came to earned revenue initially, and it's continued to bear itself out, sponsored content. Right. It was original content, and it worked, to your point, Mike, across so many different verticals, whether it was a niche product or not. I mean, we worked with finance and education and retail and grocery, and I could go on and on and on. And obviously we're seeing that work. It's applied differently here. Check out DFW is a different business, but the same principles work. I would also say, when we talk about the legs of the stool, we tend to talk about these legs like they're these really big, cumbersome things. You have reader revenue, and then you have advertising, and then you have philanthropy, and they sound huge. They sound heavy. I would tell somebody, think about our model for a second. David and I have one leg to our stool, which is marketing partnerships with businesses. But within that, to your point, Mike, we have literally dozens of categories that we can have meaningful conversations with and help. And I would say, David, what do we? I mean, we've created 7-10 different products in the span of just a few months by listening to business and advertiser need. Now you got to be focused. You can't chase shiny things all the time, but we've really built out a product portfolio of marketing partnership, products and services here that's pretty broad and increasingly deep, all around content in some form or manifestation. And so the reason I say all this to say, we have one leg to the stool, but this stool feels like it's got 10 sub legs under it. So it's a lot deeper than just saying we do ads or we do reader revenue. I think people have to be more nuanced in their thinking about that.
Dave, let's assume now we've jazzed that traditional media executive in a media market that says, okay, I've had it. I'm going to shift. I'm going to evolve. Who is the perfect content person you have working for you? I don't want you to give us a name, but what background? I'm not looking for that J school grad that wants to win a Pulitzer. Maybe I am. I don't want to put words in your mouth. How have you found these people? What qualities do you look for? And are they really expensive, or are they loving their job? Give me an idea of what you got.
Yeah, so I'm sure journalism people throw rotten apples at me for this, but honestly, people, seriously, they will, but people in public relations and people in content marketing. I think I have one journalist, somebody that's going to journalism, truly working with me, for me. Everybody else is in PR and in content marketing. And the reason that's great for us is because they understand audience and they understand engagement and they understand marketing.
But we are in no way, let's make sure we understand, we are in no way disparaging journalism here. We're just simply saying it's another darn leg to the stool.
It's another leg to the stool, and it's a leg that at the end of the day, it's really about it's telling a story, and it's telling a story that is useful. And people in many different areas in different industries can, kind of do that. And I think journalists have typically looked at things like, I need to hire a reporter needs to come from this school, needs to have been at City Hall for this long and done this. I don't think that's necessary anymore. You need to find somebody who's going to uphold your standards for sure. But the idea that they need to have all that, that kind of background just doesn't make sense, because the way that people, when you think about what you're doing when you are creating content and you're pushing it out and you're distributing, you are marketing your content. But newsrooms aren't marketers. And that's why these people are coming from public relations and content marketing backgrounds to understand how to write and report are incredibly effective and needed right now for media.
I just want to say this too, Mike. Like, first off, we do have a quality standard, and that's important, like David talked about. But also, everything, it's easy to go, oh, we're talking about public relations and content marketing. Like, so what does that mean for the reader experience? Does that mean there's ads everywhere and it's confusing? No, like you've heard me use this term before. David's sick of me using this term, but like you not only you really have a mandate as a media company to do right by your reader and by your business partner in parallel at all times.
I agree.
And that is doable. And there's just way too many examples of like that becoming perversely out of whack in the course of media where, oh, we went all in on eyeballs or we went all in on hard.
No. There's a blend here. Yeah. My number 2 revenue stream now is sponsored content. And I had a vendor that I used their product a few years ago. It does not work. I'm not going to mention their name. It was putting lipstick on a pig when I took it to market, who wanted to throw me a lot of money to do sponsored content for them, an editor and publisher. And I said, no.
Yeah.
I said, I just can't go to bed at night. Let me tell you, you can have integrity.
Yes.
And my readers like my sponsored content.
Yeah. I totally agree. And the last thing I would just quickly say on this about audience, David mentioned, that professionals like who he's describing know audience, they know market, and they know marketing. David and I have a stand-up every morning. Sometimes it's 30 minutes. Usually I'm talking too much, and it's about 90 minutes or so.
Not you,
got to go to your day job now.
No.
Yeah, right. I'm shocked too. And then we'll often have a wrap-up call at the end of the day and certainly at the end of the week. And aside from just looking at finances and revenue pacing, I mean, David, I would assert that the number one thing we focus on at the start of every day and the end of every day is audience growth.
There you go.
Is where to find audience and how to bring the right brand and the right content to the right audiences. I mean this how I mean it. We obsess over that. That is the number one thing that brings us together. And I think everybody has to have that mindset today.
And I think the audience growth thing is interesting when it's connected to sales, because, one of the things that I've told Jed in the last few days is, we're doing some packages for some advertisers and we're putting together some content for them. And I said, what I love about this is content I actually want us to create. Like, this isn't content that Jed got an advertiser to agree to and now I have to go fulfill the order. This is actually content that I've actually pitched and now the advertiser sees the value and I would have written it regardless. Mm-hmm. And now we're able to kind of put it around it. So when you think of it that way, it totally changes how you build products for people.
And you take that stance. I'm talking to the publishers out there right now. I have a very aggressive sales force. They're outsourced. They're great. I love both of them. And every now and then they bring me an idea that I have to reject. And I like money. I'm not a communist. I need money. E&P was losing its shirt when I took this thing over. We're on fire right now. No one says my brand is tarnished that I do sponsored content, but I'm constantly saying no. You can say no when you look out for your brand.
And you can say no on 2 levels. One is brand and saying, no, that doesn't match our quality standard, or that's just not something we want to tether our reputation to. And it doesn't mean the idea is bad, but you're allowed to say with your enterprise, it's just not for us.
It's not for us, right?
The other thing you're allowed to say no on, and I think you have to be ruthless in saying no, even when it's really hard, is this is not a core competency. And so, sure, we can go do that, but I'm going to make David go build a whole bunch of custom stuff, and I'm going to stretch and have to go build a bunch of custom stuff just to get that sale. And then we're going to look back in a month or 3 months' time and go, we made some short-term money, but what kind of pretzel did we get ourselves into? That's not scalable for us. We're playing defense the whole time, trying to deliver that for that client. And I say this every time we ever talk about entrepreneurship, building an enterprise, and certainly in the case of David and me, a new business, opportunity cost is real, and it's everything with every decision.
It's totally real.
If David goes out and builds with his team 8 or 10 pieces of content today and decides to go down one lane and it's the wrong lane, What did we sacrifice in the process? If I go out and bring in, potential clients, and David and I go, okay, we're doing that then because we're contractually obligated. What are the things that were left on the cutting room floor that we didn't do as well at all, or that we didn't do as well? And I think you just have to be ruthless about sizing up those trade-offs.
I will leave you with this thought. We've gone way over time, but I'm having such fun chatting with both of you. My favorite quote from Broadway show was Pippin. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's one of the first ones I saw in the 1970s. I saw the original with Ben Vereen and Irene Ryan, but on the stage, after King Charlemagne is yelled at by his wife, this is the end of Act One. He looks at the audience and says, sometimes the fornicating you're getting is not worth the fornicating you're getting. And I know there are people that are going to send me hate mail for that. But if you go down the road and you build stuff that nobody wants and you launch things that aren't profitable, then shame on you. You see where I'm going? So I think you said, we got to close this out now, guys. If someone wants more information to look at your model, check out DFW. It's so easy to find, right? It's all there, wide open, no paywall. What is your new email address, Jed, if someone wants to talk to you?
Real easy. It's just Jed, which Starbucks can't spell, but I think most normal educated people can spell. It's just JED at checkoutdfw.com. And there's also a bunch of places on the website where people just want to give us feedback, submit questions, submit a story idea. There's a bunch of ways to do that.
David, David, let me guess. David at? No, yes?
Yeah, good guess. Good guess. Yep.
David at checkoutdfw.com. For those that don't know, DFW is also the airport designation. But if you come here, I don't know if it would be checkout TP or TPA here. So that's,
I don't know. We just lay on a secret. We might be looking at domains. So we'd need to call on you, Mike, and go, okay, do we need to use an abbreviation? Do we need to spell it out? Like, we're going to need the dirt on how to actually, get the inside naming right there. So.
You got a deal. Everyone have a wonderful day. Stay healthy. We'll check in with you guys in a few months, see how things are going. Really appreciate your time, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike.